Hello everyone, this is Taki from bigheadtaco.com and welcome to this parking garage. I am here testing the Fujifilm X-S10 with the 10-24. I'm at 12mm and I am set at because I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, I am set at 1/48th of a second. I set the camera at f4 because I wanted the widest aperture for this and just put it on auto ISO. And as well, I do have a neutral density filter as well as a polarizing filter. So when we go out and it's brighter out there, being stuck at 1/48th of a second shutter speed is very limiting, where I would need to stop this lens down to like at least probably up to f16. I am also comparing this setup with the Sony A7C with the 20mm f1.8. Now that lens, because it's full frame and I'm at f1.8, where the APS-C would probably have to be around f1.2 in terms of the equivalence of shallow depth of field. Now this lens here, I'm stuck at f4. I can't go any brighter, which in full frame is like f5.6. So there already is an advantage to the Sony and that 20 f1.8. But the advantage of this is I do have a zoom lens. So I'm at 12mm right now, and the Sony at 20mm and APS-C equivalent is at 15mm. So that'll be around like this, right? So let's switch over and we'll see what kind of bookalicious shallow depth of field we're gonna get with the Sony. All right, so now I am switched over to the Sony A7C with the 20mm f1.8, and I think you can immediately tell. Look at that bokeh difference. I am set at 1/50th of a second f1.8, and it looks like auto ISO at 125 ISO. And so you can see right away the advantage of shooting with a full frame camera with a fast aperture prime. Now, again, the minus of this is not a zoom. So some vloggers sometimes, you're shooting wide like this, and then when you need to zoom in, you flip it around, you can zoom in. You can't do that with this. But in terms of size and weight, this is very similar here. I'm gonna just grab the Fujifilm right now. This is what I was vlogging with, the Fujifilm X-S10 with the 10-24. You get the advantage of the zoom, but the widest aperture is f4. And in terms of full frame equivalence, in terms of shallow depth of field, an f4 acts like an f5.6 on a full frame. And so you're not gonna get that much isolation unless you get very, very close like this. But I was holding it about like this, about the same distance that I'm holding the Sony right now. But of course, as I said, I was originally, I think, around 12mm, so you can go wider with this, which is nice. Vlogging, this isn't too bad. This is probably, and this is the reason why I asked for the 20 f1.8. I'm usually comfortable around 12 or 13 because the way I do it is, as you can see, I'm holding it with my arm here, right? And so it's far away enough where you could sort of see my environment as well as me, but then you don't see my arm dropping like that, right? It's below camera level, and I find that 12 is nice because I can get a little bit closer like this and still be about this size but be this close, so I don't need to talk as loud when I'm out and about, and as well you don't see the drop in my arm. So again, you can immediately see the depth of field advantage in terms of if you're looking for shallow depth of field. The problem with shooting at f1.8 is, of course, when we get out there in the sun, I'm at 24 frames per second, which forces me to shoot at about 1/48th of a second shutter speed, which will then crank up the aperture. So that's why you need neutral density filters. This is a variable ND filter from K&F, so thank you K&F for sending this out to me. So I'm gonna be using this like that. So let's just scoot it on right now. Here we go. All right, it's screwed on, and I'm gonna have it the brightest. I'm gonna have the brightest right now. So you can see a little bit of vignetting, which actually looks pretty cool. And now the camera's bumped up the ISO to 250, but I'm still set at 1/50th of a second at f1.8 because that's what I want as someone who wants a certain look at 24 frames per second. You get a little bit of that smoothness, a little bit of a blur, where if I'm shooting much faster, it's a little bit more jittery, right? So I have the ND filter on, and because this is variable, as it gets brighter out there, I can stop down. See, now I'm at ISO 1600, and where before I was at ISO 100, 125, so that's a huge difference. And so let's walk through this parking lot here. It's a private parking lot, so it's getting really dark in here too, right? Let's just walk through here and we will see. So now we're going out into the sun. Well, not really, it's the alley. And how was that now? Still pretty darn good, eh? It's not too bad. This gives me a bit of an advantage here. The ISO 100 is flashing, which means I'm probably getting a little bit of losing some highlights. So let's just turn this darker, and now it's not flashing. Now the camera's like, this is the proper exposure. So I'm at ISO 200 and all the other settings are fine. And I'm gonna now switch back over to the Fujifilm and we'll see how that handles being out here. All right, and switch back over to the Fujifilm X-S10 with the 10-24. I'm at 12 millimeters, so it allows me to get a little bit closer. Settings are the same, 1/48th of a second, f4 at ISO 160, and I don't need to use the neutral density filter because I'm at f4. It's still fine here, but if I go out to places where the light is a little brighter, then I would have to pop on the ND filter. But what do you think so far? I'm gonna just start walking so you can gonna get a sense of the image stabilization in the Sony versus the Fujifilm. I do have the this 10-24 does have a little bit of OIS. It's 3.5 stops, I think, and then the built-in IBIS in the X-S10. And this is a pre-production model, so Fujifilm did say this isn't the final. So let's not judge the IBIS completely on this until I get a production model. But just kind of give you an overall sense. The size and weight, as I said, of the X-S10, the 10-24, is very similar to the Sony A7C with the 20 f1.8. In fact, I'll measure at home, or I'll put the weight down here so you can see that. But the biggest difference you'll see is the depth of field, the shallow depth of field on the Sony, because it is an f1.8. And as I mentioned earlier, for APS-C to get similar shallow depth of field, this you'd need a 15 millimeter, probably like a 15 millimeter f1.2, and I don't see Fujifilm making that lens because it's a very narrow focus lens. In fact, what they would do is probably, if anything, make a 14 millimeter f2, because there is a 14 millimeter f2.8. I do wish there was a brighter version of that. So if it was at least an f2, if they can make a 14 millimeter f1.4 at a similar size and weight of the Sony, which I don't see why they can't, because Sony can do it. So I'm sure Fujifilm can. Then I think we would have a contender for a prime lens for vlogging. And so let's see what else we can test on these two setups. All right, now I have switched back to the Sony A7C with a 20 f1.8. I have the ND filter to maximum, and I had to stop down to f5.6 because even with this ND filter, I mean, there are stronger ND filters. This is I'll put it down here. This is like sort of like the mid or low level ND. You can get ones that have way more, adds more density, but I didn't think I would need that much. But at f1.8, and because I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, so I'm forced to shoot at 1/50th of a second, because of that I need to stop down. So this is a similar depth of field that you will get with the Fujifilm on f4 anyway. So this is probably a good test to see sort of the depth of field that you're getting. I am kind of in the shadows now, so it shouldn't be too bad. I wish there was a tally light. Fujifilm has a little blinking light, and you could decide if it's blinking, if it's solid, if it's for the front of the camera or the back. That's a really nice feature that Fujifilm added, I think starting with the X-H1, and they've pretty much put it in every camera thus far. Sony, I wish you did that. I flipped back the articulating screen because these are polarizing sunglasses. You can't see the screen with these, so that's another point. If you decide to wear sunglasses while vlogging, don't get polarizers. And now here we go. Now we're in the sun, and this is what you'll see at f5.6. Because see, right now I have no idea if I'm recording or not, other than the little funny beep sound it made when I pressed the button. So let's just stop this and switch back over to the Fujifilm. All right, I'm back on to the Fujifilm. Switch the ND filter, and you can see how when I fade, you can see how important it is, because I am at f4 here, so you're gonna get similar depth of field as you saw when I was on the Sony, and now I'm walking into the light here, and it's weird. with my polarizing sunglasses, I couldn't see the Sony screen, but I could see the Fujifilm. So it has to do with the orientation of the ND, because if I go this way, now I can't see anything on the Fuji LCD screen. So I guess it depends on how because I know ND, the polarizer, I'm not a scientist. I don't know exactly how it works, but see that? Now it disappears on me. So for Fujifilm with the X-S10, you can definitely wear your sunglasses, at least with this model. Maybe it's a random kind of how they do the LCD screen, but here we go. So now I'm going into the shade. I'm at ISO 1200. Oh, someone's passing by here. I'm at ISO 1200 in the shade, but then I can, again, flip this back over here and we'll see where the camera settles in. It settles in at ISO 200 now with this variable ND filter. And so that's the kind of nice thing, that you can see yourself and have the variable ND and not have to switch the aperture to reduce the amount of light that's coming in. So that's pretty cool. And so already I see an advantage with this Fujifilm X-S10. You have the blinking tally light, so you know that you're recording. At least with this model, I can see the LCD screen with with polarized sunglasses, and then that way, now let's walk back into the light, into the sun here. And also you're seeing both the OIS, IBIS, as well as digital stab, and now this overly bright, and then I get this ND filter, and look at that. Look at that. What do you guys think? I think that worked out pretty darn good. And so now let's, I don't know, what do you guys want me to do? All right, I thought I'd actually run the same test where I'm going from shadow to bright sunlight and then using the neutral density filter. I had to take my sunglasses off because, like I said, with the Sony, I can't see the LCD screen with polarized sunglasses, but when I go vertical, I can see. So it's the opposite of the Fujifilm, which is odd. So here we go. So I'm going into the sun. I'm at f4, way too bright. Now let's just fade this down to maximum density. And how does that look? I think that looks pretty darn good. And then I'll be approaching the shade again here. And now we're in the shade a little bit and switch. No, it's not. Let's just go into real shade here. Here we go, real shade, and then fade that back this way over here. And then from here, I can even then change the aperture, because this is, I'm using the aperture ring. And now fade this like that. And now you're seeing, there we go, let's just do that. There you go. Now you're seeing the advantage of full frame 20mm f1.8. You get that beautiful shallow bokeh. What do you guys think? I mean, if that's what you're looking for. I'm not used to it. I've always used, in general, the 10 to 24 for vlogging with Fujifilm at f4, which is a 5.6 in full frame. I'm gonna cross the street here. And so seeing this beautiful shallow depth of field is pretty chocolatey. It's pretty chocolatey. I'm pretty impressed. So let's go back to the garage and finish up this this quick vlogging review. All right, just walking through the alley here and into the parking lot, and then we will see how the auto exposure works. That's one of the things. Didn't spend too much time. It's not too bad. The eye tracking, I think, is pretty good. I have the ND filter on. I think it's on at max, isn't it? There you go. Let's brighten things up a little bit here, and you can see there's a bit of vignetting, but it's not too bad. I think it looks kind of cool, but if you're trying to avoid that, then I do have the lens here is a 67mm filter thread, and the filter is a 72 because that's what the 10 to 24 is. So I do have a step down, step up ring on here, and so that does help a little bit with the vignetting, but you can still kind of see that. And let's pull it right off. Let's pull it right off. Here we go. So now it's completely off. It's just the pure 20 f1.8 with all the settings, as I said before. I'm still set at 1/50th of a second because I'm at 24 frames per second, and at f1.8, so you can see that beautiful bokeh again that I'm not used to. And then here's the Fujifilm 10 to 24. So let's switch back, and then from there we'll talk about which one I like so far. Alright guys, now we're back on the Fujifilm X-S10 with the 10-24. It does actually feel like it's a little bit lighter. They feel very similar in weight anyways between the two cameras. But here we go. So number one, I like the tally light on the Fujifilm. It tells you when you're recording. Of course, if you have the selfie screen out, maybe you don't need it, but I think it's great because in general, I've learned not to rely on a articulating screen to watch myself while vlogging. I don't think it's that important. And I find it irritating when I see vloggers looking sideways and always checking themselves. It's easier to just flip that screen back and not have to do that. So that's one suggestion. I do like this 10-24 because it's a zoom, so I can decide to zoom out and zoom in like this as I please. I do like this. This is a distance that I like because I can get a little bit closer like this, which is about the same as what I'm getting with the Sony when I'm out about like this. Like that, and you have the flexibility of the zoom, but the brightest you do get with this lens is f4, and that's the biggest weakness, I guess, when it comes not to this lens, but as well as APS-C format. I don't see Fujifilm creating a 10-24 f2.8, and even if they do, it'll be a monstrous lens because we've seen what the 8-16 f2.8 constant looks like. And so I think the size and weight for a vlogging lens is perfect. At most, I think what Fujifilm can do is maybe do a 10-18 and then have it f2.8 to f4, so not a constant aperture. That's probably the best way that they can make it as bright as they can. But having that, here we go, let me just grab it. Fully taking advantage of full frame, being able to have a 20 f1.8, so this is not a zoom, so that's the inherent weakness of this, but you're getting that beautiful shallow depth of field, which is just fantastic. And if you're doing low light vlogging, which maybe I'll test that next, you can have better low light performance on the Sony because it's full frame, and as well we know that Sony's eye tracking, face tracking, autofocus is the best in the industry. Fujifilm's getting definitely better, but it's nowhere near what the City Life is, nowhere as good as the Sony. And so right now, if I had to choose, I would still choose probably the Fujifilm setup because of the versatility, because it's also a good stills camera, but as well having the zoom, having the tally light, those things are really important to me. Bokeh is nice, but it's not the be-all end-all for me when I am vlogging. And so this is fantastic, but we haven't tried low light yet, and we haven't tried stills yet with both of these cameras. I already know what I'm going to get with the Fujifilm. I don't know what I'm going to get with the Sony. So that'll be probably part 2 of this comparison. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Don't forget to tell your friends. We'll talk to you soon. Happy shooting. All right, let's not be unfair to the Sony. We'll do the same thing. We'll do the spin. What do you guys think? Look at that bokeh. It's just, this is awesome. I don't know. The Sony's looking pretty darn good, guys. It's looking pretty darn good. You ready for it? You ready for it? And boom.